Okay, so I just mentioned beforehand, just come back from teaching a retreat in Thailand, 200 people. They all did very, very well. And it's wonderful holding it in such luxurious surroundings and seeing people so happy and so peaceful. I remember for many of the people who came on the retreat, so last Friday I was in Phuket teaching it, these were people who are spending their holidays. They only get a couple of weeks off every year, and they decide to spend it doing a meditation retreat. It was a nice hotel. And what would be interesting is when they went back to work afterwards and people say, "Where did you go on a retreat?" They say, "I went to this hotel in Phuket." "Oh, very good." But when they told them what they did there, they couldn't use a swimming pool, they couldn't use the mini bar, they couldn't use the TV. So what do you go to a big hotel like that for if you can't do any of that sort of stuff? It's because they didn't need to do that sort of stuff to make themselves peaceful and happy. Which is an interesting thing, and it's one of the reasons I'm giving a talk that somebody asked me the question on some of the 5 precepts and the difficulties of keeping those 5 precepts for a lay person, let alone even a monk. But also, I wanted to go into why. Now, do we have these 5 precepts? In particular, we're talking about the precept with alcohol and the precept of sex. And for those of you who don't know, the Buddhists keep 5 precepts, and that's all types of Buddhists keep these 5 precepts. It goes across all of the different forms of Buddhism. And that is not deliberately killing a living being, not intentionally stealing, not committing adultery, not telling a deliberate fib, and not taking alcohol or drugs which intoxicate the mind. In other words, non-medicinal drugs. And sometimes people say, well, why? What's the purpose of this? Is it just some sort of morality to be a goody-goody? Is it just because you don't want to do some sort of sin or bad thing? You don't even know what is a sin, what is a bad thing. Why is the main reason I'm giving this talk tonight. And of course, like many of you in your life, just like myself, when I was growing up, it was just something you had to do, to drink alcohol. It was just almost like a rite of passage. And I still remember the first glass of beer I ever took. And I remember it because it was tasted disgusting. And I wonder, what is a big deal? Why do so many people actually pay money for this? And that was and I think maybe many of you, if you can remember, if you have taken alcohol, the first time you took some whiskey or whatever, it didn't actually taste nice. So why did actually people get into it? It's because people said it was fun, people said you had to do this, people said it was delicious, and after a while the peer pressure actually brainwashed me into actually thinking it was nice and thinking it was fun. Now, one of the reasons I became a Buddhist monk is because I wasn't just going to follow what other people were doing. I'm not just going to believe in the culture in which I was brought up. I was always wanting to question, always asking those hard questions and not stopping until I got a reasonable answer. And so you started to think, what am I doing this for? So as almost like as an experiment, you gave up taking alcohol for a while, and my life improved enormously. I realized I didn't need this to be happy. Number one, you were a student at the time, and I saved a lot of money, not having to buy this expensive alcohol. It's amazing just how expensive it is. It is so expensive. That's one of the reasons why people try and smuggle it into the country, to avoid all the customs, because I just go traveling a lot, and people always seem to be getting caught. It reminds me of one of those stories about this fellow who was coming through Perth Airport many years ago, when they had the Green Channel. It just went straight through there. And you all know that people in the customs, they have to check somebody at random. So they checked this guy, can I look in your suitcases, sir? And so he opened up his suitcases, and at the bottom of the suitcase they found a bottle of whiskey, undeclared. You know how customs officers are. They say, what's this? And thinking quickly, he said, I'm a Catholic. I've just been on pilgrimage to the holy city of Lourdes. It's holy water. Can I go now? I said, well, look, it's in a bottle with Johnny Walker on the outside. What do you mean it's sort of holy water? Well, look, it's water. I've got to put it in something. I just happen to have that bottle. So it's holy water, from Lourdes, it's, from my old grandmother, make her well again. And of course, customs officers are almost trained, not to believe you. And so he said, I'm going to open up the cap and test it. And he opened up the cap and he smelt it. And he handed it to the traveller and said, you smell it. It's whiskey, it's not water. And so the traveller, he smelled it and said, my goodness, you're right. It's another miracle. And actually, that is why, if you ever actually do travelling, if you actually have a look at all that stuff which they give you, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but actually holy water is actually prohibited from actually importing into Australia. It's with wooden items, cheese, dairy products, also holy water. You cannot import it into Australia. It's one of the banned substances. And of course now you know why, because sometimes miracles happen and it gets converted into whiskey. But so why do people actually pay so much for it? And also, so when I gave it up, I didn't have to pay so much for it, but also that you had a much more happy time. Because I asked myself afterwards, why do people actually want to take that alcohol? It didn't really taste that nice. And if you're going to take alcohol, it's just to get this sense of intoxication. In other words, to lose your inhibitions. But the problem with losing inhibitions is you can't choose which inhibitions you're going to lose and which you're going to keep, which is the trouble there. They all go. And look, a couple of years ago, I met one of my friends when I was visiting England. He was an old friend from Cambridge days. Now that was about 40 years now. Now he's this highly respected businessman. He's an actuary. An actuary is these mathematical geniuses who work out just the odds of falling off a building. It works out the probabilities for insurance companies. And he was one of the top, if not the top actuary in the whole of Europe. And so when I met him, we hadn't seen each other for 40 years, a highly successful, very sort of good man. And I reminded him of the nickname we had for him at Cambridge, which was Flash. And the reason we called him Flash was because one night at one of the parties we had, he did get drunk. And he went into the toilets and he came out with nothing on. That's why we called him Flash. And he said, better not talk too much about that, Ajahn Brahm. And you can see sometimes what happens. You lose too many inhibitions at such times and do really stupid things. Now that is pretty innocuous, but sometimes it's much worse than that. And this is one of the problems and dangers, and it's one of the reasons why, you're losing all your inhibitions, but some of those inhibitions are really important to keep. And that was when I first came to Australia many years ago. I was asked to do some funeral services, by my fellow monk. He was busy, and sometimes I had to take the services. And one of the funeral services I will never forget, it probably was the saddest funeral service I've ever taken. And look, I've done funeral services for people committing suicide, people who died in all sorts of tragic circumstances, but none of them beat this one. Because it was a young girl from mainland China, and she had worked really hard to get a scholarship to come to Australia to study. And I forget which university it was, but she completed her studies, worked really hard with hardly any money, graduated, and got her first job, and after a few months of working, managed to save enough money to invite her parents over from China to come and visit her. Now remember, these parents had sacrificed, literally sacrificed, to get her kid, up to that point. Scholarship over to Australia, through university. Now she's got her job. Now she wanted to show her parents sort of her success. And her parents had only been in Australia a couple of days. And she was walking in the town of Kelmscott, on the pavement, when a boy lost control of the car because he was drunk and just hit her and killed her. And I will never remember, I can never forget looking at those two parents. They couldn't speak any English. Their child was their only connection to this strange land they'd come to. And they'd lost their life, their meaning, their hope had all been bound up into this one daughter. And she had done her part. She'd worked so hard and so well. And now her life had just been, in a couple of seconds, taken away by some guy who just drank too much, lost control of the car, and ploughed into her. And it's so... The sadness was because it was so unnecessary, so stupid. Why do you do such things? And that is one of the reasons why, you lose inhibitions and so that you can sort of have a good time. But is it really a good time? Because there's some inhibitions you shouldn't lose. And anyway, those inhibitions which do make you just not think so much about yourself and worry so much about yourself and feel a bit too shy amongst other people, there are other ways of overcoming those inhibitions. And that's some of the things we do here with good, decent Buddhist practices. A bit of meditation, a little bit of metta for yourself and others, a little bit of forgiveness so you're not so critical of yourself and others. That's a great way of overcoming those inhibitions. The way that we always look upon ourselves with negativity, which makes us shy, which makes us feel I'm not good enough, I'm not confident enough. And of course, those of you who've been here for a long time now know that there is a very easy way to overcome those inhibitions. A little bit of loving kindness, a little bit of looking at yourself, and the door of my heart's open to me no matter what I ever do, which means you can open up to making mistakes. In Buddhism, there's nothing wrong with making mistakes. We never tell anyone to feel guilty or feel ashamed of themselves. And sometimes, of course, you've heard me tell all the stupid things which I have done in my past. And I keep on bringing up those stories. What's another stupid thing which I have done in my past, especially as a monk? Oh, and I think I told this in Phuket. When I started wearing these glasses, reading glasses, they're only reading glasses. I only really need these actually to read books. These ones which transition, so when you look up, it's just these are ordinary plain glass. But the reason I always wear them now is because once on a Friday afternoon I was leaving Bodhinyana Monastery in Serpentine to come here. And halfway down the road I had to tell the driver, I left my glasses back in the monastery. You have to turn around to go back because I have to read things when I'm here on the weekend doing administration work. And then the driver turned around to me and said, Ajahn Brahm, please look on the top of your nose. And of course that's where the glasses were. If it happened to you, it certainly happened to me. And the way to overcome that these days is to make sure I always put them on the top of my nose. At least I know where they are. And that's the only reason. I've made that mistake. Many other people have made that mistake. We've all done stupid things. But the thing is, I don't mind telling people about it, which means I'm not embarrassed or ashamed about making mistakes. And that is one of the great ways of overcoming your inhibitions. What are you inhibited for? Why do we take alcohol? Because we don't feel ashamed when we make mistakes. We can be silly. And actually, sometimes people are too silly when they get drunk. They should have some inhibitions. Remember, other people are looking at you. And again, I'll never forget that one time when I was teaching a retreat in Penang. I was teaching a retreat in Penang. It was Christmas Day, and somebody on the opposite side of the room to where I was sleeping, on the opposite side of the road, decided to have a karaoke party. Fair enough, we're tolerant to all the different religions. If you want to have a karaoke party as a Christian, fine. But they were drinking so much alcohol that by the time it got to about midnight, when I really needed to get some sleep, the party was in full swing, which you wouldn't have minded. But when you take alcohol and you try and do karaoke, you'd think you're Frank Sinatra, but you're not. You're like a wild dog with a sore throat. You're really hopeless. And also that you lose all your inhibitions and you shout and think you're singing so well. Now remember, other people have to listen to that on the opposite side of the road, and these are good monks who want to have a sleep so they can teach meditation the following day. So that lady made very, very, very bad karma. And of course, they cause a lot of suffering to many, many people when you're drunk and you try and sing. So there are some inhibitions we should keep so we don't cause problems and troubles to other people. It's just compassion. So you can see that sometimes some inhibitions we should keep. And this is actually where the Buddhist part comes in, because we make such a huge emphasis on the spiritual quality of mindfulness, being aware, being awake. It's a key to solving so many problems and avoiding so many dangers in life. Mindfulness of what you're doing to yourself, mindfulness of how you feel, mindfulness of what's going through your head at the time. And of course, that mindfulness is so highly regarded. That is one of the reasons why the Buddha said, oh, come on, you don't need those drugs and alcohol, because it just takes away the clarity of your mind. And once I started to understand that, it was actually made so much more sense. The music I liked to hear when I was young, going to parties, was Jimi Hendrix, sometimes the Doors. Those of you at that sort of age, I love that type of music. And I used to see these people. It was great fun sort of going to these great concerts. But if ever I took any alcohol, you couldn't appreciate it anymore. Your senses were dulled. You just really couldn't get into it. And I remember at the time we used to try and get these recordings on, they used to call it hi-fi at the time. And they're amazing, just the quality of recordings you can get now on digital. They're so beautiful, they're so sharp, and they're so clear. But you can't hear anything when you're sort of, you're even taking a little bit of alcohol or a little bit of drugs. It means your senses are dulled. You can't really appreciate it. You can't really get into it. You're not awake. You're not alert. You're actually wasting this beautiful thing called awareness and mindfulness, which gives you a deep quality in life. You can feel things. You can know things. You can see things. And it's because of the importance of that, of mindfulness, to enjoy your life, rather than going through a cloud and a sort of in dullness, which is one of the reasons why Buddha said, look, come on, you don't need this sort of stuff. You will actually enjoy your life much more. But why is it that people don't sort of see that? And again, most of it is because people are sheep. There are a lot of sheep in Australia, and they haven't all got 4 legs. Many have got 2 legs. And by that, I mean we just don't think for ourselves. We just do what other people do. Follow the crowd. Follow the peer pressure. People say, oh, yeah, come and take a drink. And say, we take a drink. Why am I doing that? I don't know. It sounded like a good idea at the time, which means just people suggested it. You just follow what other people are doing. And if you aren't going to live a spiritual life, if you really want to get anywhere in your life, if you really want to understand life, then you have to just follow your own way. In other words, ask those questions, make those experiments, find out, is it happier or is it unhappier? Because when I gave up alcohol as a student, I thought it was not going to work. In fact, I had one of my cousins, he said, I'll bet you £1. That was a lot of money in those days, especially for a student. I don't think you're going to last a week. I won that £1. I was very proud of that. Because, of course, it lasted, I don't know, about 50 years now. No, not that long, 40 years or so. But, again, I thought it was a sacrifice because I thought that if I go and give up alcohol, who would invite me to any parties? Who would want to go out with someone? In Australia, we call them a wowser. Who would want to invite a wowser to their parties? But actually, I got invited to more parties than ever. I got an increase in my social life. And the reason was because all my friends wanted someone sober to drive them home, and that was me. So there's a great advantage in this. And of course, you lost many disadvantages. Because I don't know if you've ever drunk anything and driven home. People are really afraid of getting caught by the police. Of course, I wasn't afraid at all. No drink. And it was wonderful. But it did remind me of a story, which I tell these stories often in other places, but I don't think I've told a story here, because I told it to one of the monks where he was coming to a house blessing the other day, and he said, Ajahn Brahm, it's the first time he'd heard this story. He thought it was very funny and very good. It was a story of the guy in Sydney who went to a party, in his office party, and he should have taken a cab home and just left his car in the car park, but you know what it's like. We think, oh, I'll give it a chance. Who knows? So he drove his car home even though he knew he was over the limit. And of course, he got caught. He got caught in one of these blitzes by the New South Wales police. They'd closed a whole road off, a main artery. I forget where it was. And were checking every car, taking their driver to see if they'd been drinking. And when he got caught in this road trap, this trap by the police, there was no way out. If he made a U-turn, that was an admission of guilt. And I must say that there used to be one member of our Buddhist society, I haven't seen him for a while. He was on New Year's Eve. He was driving home over the Causeway. Those of you who know Perth, the police were having a roadblock there. And so he'd been drinking, and he'd actually saw the roadblock. They were testing people, for their blood alcohol level. He did a U-turn to try and escape. And of course, there was a police car in the bushes. And they caught him and say, you did a U-turn, that's an admission of guilt, you're busted. So you can't do a U-turn, you have to just wait. And so the guy knew he was caught. So he just waited with resignation, way over the limit. He'll probably cop a big fine and maybe even lose his license. When it got to his turn, in New South Wales, I don't know if they do this here, the policeman asked him to get out of the car. And when he was out of the car, that was when the policeman gave him the breathalyzer tube. And it was actually at that moment that they, both of them, the policeman and this driver, heard the sound of a crash. One car had been going slightly too fast on this road traffic hazard where they're stopping all the cars, and had got into the rear end of the car in front of it. The policeman heard that crash and said to the driver, "Sir, it's more important I deal with this road traffic incident than test your alcohol level." And he took the breathalyzer tube back and said, "Sir, get in your car and go home." He'd literally come in seconds, within seconds of getting caught. Literally. And if it wasn't for that traffic accident, he would have been done. He'd have been caught. A couple of seconds. That's all it took, and he was okay. So the following morning, the story hasn't ended yet. He was very, very lucky. The following morning, he was woken up by somebody ringing his doorbell. Again and again and again. They wouldn't give up. So he quickly got dressed. He had a hangover from the night before. When he opened the door, there was 2 New South Wales policemen in front of the door. And of course, if you ever see policemen, even if you're innocent, you usually feel afraid. Not if you're a monk. We're so pure, we're not afraid of anything. But if you saw a policeman at your door, you think, "Oh my goodness, what's happening?" But he realised he's not driving now, even though he's got a hangover, still have blood in his alcohol in his blood. It doesn't matter. So he said, "What do you want?" And the policeman said, "Sir, can we look inside your garage?" He said, "Nothing there, only my car." "Sure." So he opened his garage door, and as he opened his door, that's where he almost had a heart attack. Because in his garage there was a police car. Not his car, a police car. Because when they said, "Get in your car and drive home," he got in the wrong car. And he drove one of theirs home. And of course, they were missing a car. They had an extra one at the roadblock. And they soon added 2 and 2 together, and he's still in jail. So that's one of the dangers. You lose your inhibitions, too many of them. But when it comes down to these things, it was actually part of the original teachings of the Buddha. He actually made a rule against that for the monks. You can't take alcohol. And the reason was this. Look, this is just, sometimes people think that, in those old days, people were very different than the time before. And this is a story about what it was like in the time of the Buddha. 2,500 years ago in India, when the Buddhist monks started to get popular, they always had a few real scallywags. There really were naughty monks in that time. And some of the lay people, you know what you're like. You're very sort of faithful, and you're very kind and generous, and you say to the monks, "Oh, you've been so good. Is there anything you need?" But they asked the wrong monks. They asked a couple of these scallywag monks, "Is there anything the monks need?" And so these monks said, "Give the monks what's hard for them to come by." What do you mean? What's harder than come by? They got enough rice and curry. No, give some booze. Because that's very hard to come by. That's very true. And he said, is that allowed? We said, yeah, that's fine. So, I mean, this was really scallywag monks, saying the wrong things. So these people had too much faith and too little wisdom. So the next day when they saw one of these monks come on alms round, it was one of these monks who made a determination, whatever you give them, they will eat. I did that for a while. Whatever you put in my bowl, that's what I'll put in my mouth. And so he'd made that resolution, and so these people started putting alcohol in his bowl. So that's what he had to put in his mouth. And they thought it was extra merit because it's something which was very rare for a monk to get. And so the problem was, by the time he'd finished his alms round, he was actually so over the limit. He was struggling to get back to the monastery to sleep it off. But what usually happens is the very, very worst of your nightmares. He managed to make it to the town gate, and actually there he collapsed. That's where he lost consciousness. He was just too drunk. It's the wrong place for him to pass out because everyone had to come in and go out through that gate. And it's just 5 minutes after he collapsed, who would come by? But the Buddha, coming back from his alms round. And that's where he saw the monk who was drunk, paralytic, unconscious on the ground. I don't know why that always, whenever you make a small mistake, isn't it always happens that you get caught out, the boss finds you. You've only done it once and it's the first time. Why does this always happen? But the poor monk got caught by the Buddha. And that's when he sort of said, monks, you should not take alcohol, because look what it does to you. Look, even when I was a young monk, it was Christmas time, and there's these 4 monks. Actually, they're all really famous monks now. I won't tell you who they are, it would embarrass them. But their parents, for Christmas, sent them some wine gums. Now, wine gums are just sweets, and they just got the name wine, but they thought, no, there'd be no wine in these. And so the 4 of them, from Canada, they sort of ate them together, just the 4 of them. They never gave any to me, and it's a good job, because I would have taken them too. And they actually had real wine in them. And the monks didn't think there was any such. They haven't had alcohol for years. So they were actually ultra-sensitive. So we had 4 drunk monks in the monastery to look after. Not a really good thing to see. They didn't really know what they were doing because they didn't think it was... but even just a small amount can actually change your mind. But obviously, if you put alcohol in the food and then it's all cooked up, you just get the taste, you don't get the alcohol. But if it's even small amounts, it can affect you quite a lot. So that's why we keep the principle, just to make life easier, more mindful, more aware. So the inhibitions which we should be keeping, we keep. Just a sense of looking after one another, not hurting or harming one another, not hurting or harming ourselves, but also that we can still have a good time by letting go of those other inhibitions which stop you. And look, even if you do want to socialize, it doesn't really matter that these days people really respect you. When I finished my I have to go back so many years because the last time I used to take alcohol, when I went to see my finish off with my university career, we were all partying, going our different ways. I asked them, so what do you think about me, my Buddhism, especially not drinking? And they said, we really respected you because you were going against the stream. You had that inner strength. You were doing what you thought was right. But you never told us what to do. So if you're ever a vegetarian or you keep precepts or you're Buddhist, don't go around being an evangelical and telling everyone else to do what you're doing. That really gets up people's noses, especially in places like Australia. Now, your job is to do what you think is right and let other people do what they think is right. If they ask advice, yeah, you can give it to them, but you don't keep telling them. That really is, that's un-Buddhist. It's certainly un-Australian. And it's the sort of thing which really gives you and other people a bad name. So one of the reasons that they said I really respected me because they were sort of took alcohol. I never criticised them. Yeah, you can do that, but I'm not going to. And it's actually very easy to do that. You don't have to keep taking it. Look, if you're in a sort of a party like that, there was this one guy who used to come here, and he said that when he started keeping his 5 precepts and gave up drinking alcohol, it was very difficult for him because the first time he went to a party or a reception, one of his work friends gave him some alcohol and he said, "No, I can't take it because I'm a Buddhist." And his friend said, "Oh, you're a Buddhist? Yeah, I know about Buddhism. I really respect Buddhism. Buddhism is all about letting go. Come on, let go, have a beer." So he was caught out. That's the trouble, that people know a little bit about Buddhism, they don't know enough. So he had to take the beer that time. He was put in a spot. But afterwards he told me that he found a solution. Because the next time he went to a reception or a party at work and someone offered him a drink, he said, "No, I can't take the alcohol, doctor's orders." And people left him alone. Because if it's doctor's orders, if it's a medical condition, no one will actually challenge you. But when he told me that, I actually criticized him back. I said, "Aren't you keeping one precept by breaking another? You're lying. There's nothing wrong with you. You're perfectly healthy." But then he actually taught me some Buddhism, because he was white. So I make mistakes sometimes. Please correct me sometimes if I make a mistake. And he actually taught me more, because it was true. He said, "Look, don't you remember, Ajahn Brahm, in many of those old teachings of the Buddhas, the sutras, many, many times he actually compared himself to a doctor." And so it was a doctor's orders. Dr. Buddha's orders. So you can always say that if you go to a party, say, "No, I don't need to drink, it's the Buddha's orders, Dr. Buddha's orders." But one of the other ways I try to get people actually to understand why, that sort of we keep this precept is, because, well, actually the story I usually say to try and get them to keep this precept, I use people's fear. Maybe not a good thing to use, but if you understand what I'm talking about by waiting until the end of this little story, I think you can understand what I'm talking about. Because in many countries, in Asia especially, people are terrified of ghosts. And in Thailand especially, they love hearing ghost stories, but of course, they're terrified of real things. That's why they like hearing them. They like going to ghost movies, because it frightens them, and they like that sort of sense of adrenaline going through their system. And it's not just Thailand, it's Chinese people as well are terrified. I don't know about Sri Lankan people. Are Sri Lankan people terrified of ghosts? Yeah, they are too, nodding their head. Okay, so many people, I don't know about Westerners, I think Westerners, they don't believe in a ghost. So if a ghost came behind you and sort of went boo, you'd say, "No, I don't believe in you, you don't exist." I don't know. But anyhow, I know that when I was a young monk, I wasn't afraid of ghosts. I remember just when Ajahn Chah's, I think his brother died, when I first went up to Thailand, and they did this open cremation. And so after they had all the monks around the fire, and we all did the chanting, and as soon as we could, all the monks left. Then afterwards, I said, "I'm just going to go by the fire." They said, "You going by the fire?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Alone?" I said, "Yeah." "Aren't you afraid of the ghosts?" I said, "No, I'm not afraid of the ghosts. I can't understand Thai." Because even if the ghost goes something in Thai, I don't know what they're talking about. So what's the point of being afraid? Is that the case, that Thai ghosts only speak in Thai? And Sri Lankans only in Sinhalese? So if it's a Western ghost and you don't understand English, you've got nothing to worry about. But anyway, people are so afraid of ghosts, and so I try to use that to try, because whenever I go to Asia, or Indonesia as well, Indonesia and Malaysia, I like telling them the story of the bottle ghost. And I get really serious, because it's one of the most dangerous ghosts in the whole world. And like many people say they don't believe in ghosts, but there is evidence for this ghost. I've seen it myself many times, and I've seen what it does to people. It actually possesses people, the bottle ghost, and they don't act in their normal way. They're strange. They don't speak in the normal way. They don't even walk they don't act in the normal way at all. They're totally different characters. And I've even seen this ghost possess people. It's no exaggeration. I've seen them get killed. It's that dangerous, a ghost. And so I warn people, and this, my honesty is there, this bottle ghost exists, and it does possess people, and it does kill them as well. And people are actually very impressed because, I don't exaggerate, I don't tell lies. And that bottle ghost, I explain what it really is. It lives in bottles of whiskey, rum, and other things. Because as soon as you take the top off, you get possessed. And you speak in very strange ways. And you can't even walk in a straight line. And you do really weird things. And sometimes you kill yourself in an accident. It's called a bottle ghost. That's actually why we call these things spirits. Have you ever wondered why they call it spirits? It's a bottle ghost. But it is true, it does kill you. That's the one thing which is really dangerous. And the thing, you don't need it to get rid of your inhibitions. The ones which you want to really get rid of. There's other ways of doing that. And to do that, it's actually to motivate yourself, to see what's really who you are and what you are, to be able to make mistakes, to take risks. One of the great ways of overcoming your inhibitions, as I said earlier, is to realize, don't be so critical of yourself and others. It's always that fear of criticism, fear of making a mistake, fear of failing. That is what people take alcohol for, to give them that sort of what they call Dutch courage. I don't know why they call it Dutch courage. I don't know what the Dutch have to do with this, but whatever, it's to give them that sort of sense that they can do anything. You can do anything anyway. So if you actually give up the alcohol and instead come and hang out in joints like this, you would actually find you get encouraged to have a go, give it a chance. And if you do fail, make a mistake, we call that in Buddhism forward failing. Not backward failing, but forward failing. In other words, you try something, it doesn't work, you learn from your experience. You learn. And that's what life is all about. Life is not about always getting things right. It's actually making mistakes, and we learn from those mistakes. As I'm sure I said this about 2 or 3 weeks ago, because I was repeating this in the talks in Bangkok and also in Phuket. When I was a school teacher, I would have to set examinations, and I have to set examinations trying to aim for an average score of 7 out of 10, 70%. Because if most of the kids got a low score, they made 3 or 4 out of 10, the average, it would be taking away their motivation. You give them the message they can't do maths. That was the subject I was teaching. It would just think that, what's the point? I'm not encouraged. But if I gave them an examination, it was so easy, they all got 9s or 10s, it would mean I could not see their weaknesses. I could not, in my next lesson, address those weaknesses. Because the whole idea of giving a test was 2 points to motivate people that, they can do it, encourage them, but also to find out their weaknesses so those weaknesses could be addressed in the next lesson. And I always use that as a simile for life. Life, you'll never get 10 out of 10. If you all got 10 out of 10, 9 out of 10, it would be a waste of time living this life. You'd learn nothing. And if all you ever got in life was 1 out of 10 or 2 out of 10, like many people think, it's just so depressing and discouraging. It's hopeless. I'm hopeless. I'm a waste of time. I can't do anything. 2 out of 10, 3 out of 10 in life, that's what happens. So we try and get like 7 out of 10, 6, 8 out of 10, around that area there. So you're encouraged. You're doing well. You can do things. You're succeeding. But you've got weaknesses. And those weaknesses is what you address, how you learn, how you get better. That's what we call it, forward failing. In other words, there's a purpose to making mistakes. There's a reason for it, and it has to be there. And the reason is you learn and you grow. So what that does, it gives you this beautiful confidence. You can give it a try. You can learn. You can grow. You can get rid of your inhibitions of what people are thinking about you and criticizing you. And of course, so that's what I've done in my whole monastic life. I've made many mistakes, given many stupid talks, many really bad jokes. But you got away with it, simply because you've been proving every time. So that is how you get rid of your inhibitions. You go into a party, you go and talk to somebody, give it a try. You may make a fool of yourself once, but then you learn. And soon you get your confidence, and so you can have a great time, you can have a lot of fun. One of the great things is your fun level goes up more and more and more. So these precepts are not there just to give people a hard time. They're actually to make a happier, more beautiful, more peaceful life. And it avoids all these dangers. I mean, look, there's so much... I do read the newspapers, binge drinking, alcohol-fueled violence, and also drug-fueled violence. And that causes a huge amount of problems in our world. There's so much so that sometimes people, they don't want to go to some parts of our city, because most people behave themselves. Well, you need one or two people, and you may be that person they sort of pick on for one reason or another. And if that's you or that's someone you love, and they get really badly injured, there's something wrong there. So, there's something actually wrong with our culture. Okay, people say in Australia that, it's almost part of the culture. But that smoking was part of the culture maybe 10 or 20 years ago. Everyone would have a cigarette. And now that, seeing the dangers in that, we've sort of let that one go. And a few people smoke, but not that many people smoke. And it's actually a great improvement in our lifestyle. And maybe we can actually improve it even further. But anyway, just as a Buddhist, we just put that out there. We're not going to sort of criticize anybody. And I'm not going to sort of excommunicate anybody who comes here if they have a drink from time to time. But please don't drink in the premises. Please don't because sometimes I've seen that happen. They go in there and they go to the boot of the car and take out a swig of something or other. So be careful, and please also don't give it to the monks, because sometimes people have done that too. They've got this cake from some shop, and it's been put whiskey in it or something like that, or rum or something. Be careful, because we are hypersensitive. A tiny amount will really affect us, and it won't affect you, because we've been dry for years and years and years and years. But anyhow, that is actually why we have this precept, and why people break it. Or why people take this alcohol. That's the interesting thing. A lot of time it's just peer pressure. It's not thinking for yourself. It's being like a sheep. And not realizing that, the benefits are outweighed by the disadvantages. And there's another way of having a beautiful, wonderful life. And for those of you who want some sort of evidence for that, every New Year's Eve, I always hold Ajahn Brahm's party. And Ajahn Brahm's party is because, in this culture, New Year's Eve is a place where many people go out there and they, go and get plastered, they get drunk. And people actually, they need to go out and to socialize and have a good time, and why not? And so I hold a party here for people to have a good time, so they don't have a good time. It's just showing it can be done without needing the alcohol part. And so by coming over here, it's usually full every time. It's usually packed. Those of you who come to Ajahn Brahm's party, I'm not exaggerating by saying you have a really great evening. And there's not any alcohol involved at all. It means that people are respectful to each other, and they're sensitive to each other, and the inhibitions, there's other ways of overcoming those inhibitions. So people meet each other, they talk to each other. I don't know, a lot of people have married each other by coming to places like this. So it's a great sort of singles place to come to if you want to go. It's true, it's happened. So why not? I mean, this is our society, and you can overcome those inhibitions by coming here. So that was actually one of the questions which people actually asked me in an email. Just why do we do this? And is it just trying to make people have a hard time? Is it trying to be ascetic? Is it like some sort of sin which you mustn't do? It's nothing to do with that. It's just basically common sense. It makes life happier and more peaceful for you, and also makes it a much better society. But the other question they was asking me in this email was about even the third precept, about the precept on sexuality for people. How far does that actually go? Is it just even premarital sex? It doesn't mean premarital sex. All it really means is any sexuality which is harming another being or actually taking advantage of them. So in actually the way the Buddha was describing it in the ancient sutras, it was actually not having sexual intercourse with an underage person or someone who is like in a position of subservience, like a slave or like a maid, or not someone who was sick or who was, say, retarded mentally. In other words, people who really did not or could not give their consent. In other words, consensual sex, fine. But if it was not, if it was some sort of lack of consent, coercion, or just taking advantage of someone else's weakness, then that was breaking the precepts. And of course one can understand the reason why, because there is something terribly wrong with that. You know, when you coerce someone, or they are not in their right minds, or they are underage, they're not responsible, mature, whatever it is to make a right decision, that was against the precepts. And I think most people in this world would agree with that. And also that, you know, if one is in a relationship, one keeps in that relationship. It's nothing to do with heterosexual, homosexuality or whatever, because it's got nothing to do with the sort of the gender relationship, but as long as one is committed to that one person. So in other words, if you are in a relationship, you keep to that relationship, you know, for the time you're in it. And if you want to sort of break up the relationship and start another relationship, fine, but make sure the first relationship is broken first of all. So in other words, it's now this thing about adultery, even if it's just boyfriend and girlfriend. So, you know, you don't sort of go around with another boyfriend when, you know, you've got sort of one already. It just complicates life so much. And of course, yeah, you think it's okay, but a lot of people, they know it's wrong. Look, I remember just being on this talkback radio show, you know, over in, was it 6PR or, no, not 6PR, it's 96 FM or something, one of the talkback shows one evening, just after teaching here on a Friday evening, that one of my friends was working over there, and they invited me onto this talkback radio show. And so the only time I was free was a Friday evening, and now I could, you know, stay up a bit later after sort of 9 o'clock. So I left here. I went to get up there for 10 o'clock. The show started, 10 p.m. But you know what it's like. People are always asking you questions, and it's hard to get away. And so I didn't get to the radio, to the studio, which was in East Perth, until just about a minute before 10 p.m. I was only there just on time. And because I was rushed to get in there, just straight into the studio, straight into the chair with the headphones on, and then the presenter started introducing me, started the show. You know, I couldn't actually have any talk with him beforehand to find out what it was all about. And that's when I always remember he introduced my co-presenter that evening. It was a lady called Dr. Gabriel Morrissey. And I always remember her name. And she was introduced as the #1 sex expert in the whole of Australia. And when I heard that, I thought, oh my God, what show am I on? Am I in the right studio? And it was on adult themes, as you can expect at 10 p.m. on a Friday night. And I got myself talk back on a show which took questions from the general public on the most intimate of details. And of course, by that time, I'd been celibate for about 35 years. And what was really interested in that show was that all the questions were actually coming to me. I don't know why that was or how that could be, because there was this lady, she's written books, she's a professor, you know, she's the go-to person on any sort of matters sexual in Australia. And she was twiddling her thumbs, doing absolutely nothing, getting bored. And because when you actually ring in and say, there's a question for, you know, the monk. Actually, at that time, I also remember they couldn't pronounce Ajahn Brahm. That was too much for them. So I said, call me Mr. Monk. So... So all these questions are coming in to Mr. Monk. Can I speak to Mr. Monk about this dysfunction of Mr. Monk about... You know, because even though I'm celibate, you know what's going on. It's just fear of failure and just a bit of inhibitions, you know, not taking risks, not being sensitive, not being mindful and compassionate and caring, you know, in your intimate relationships. Simple things which actually are very powerful and very deep, especially as a monk knows these emotions of the mind, and just the way that fear and can just mess up fear and lack of intimacy, lack of actually being with the other person. It's not about me, it's not about you, it's about us. And so I was actually getting all these calls. People were really impressed. But I always remember this one call which came from a taxi driver. because they're the only real people who are around at sort of that time of night waiting for a lift, got the radio on and being able to ring in for a call. And this taxi driver, I always remember this question, because there was one question I really nailed immediately. I could see where he's coming from and got it straight away. He said, "Mr. Monk, I'd like to ask you this question." Yes. He said, "I'm having an affair. My wife doesn't know about it. Is it right?" That was a question. And instead of going into the philosophy of ethics, immediately I replied, "Sir, if it was right, you would not be ringing me up to ask." And he put the phone down immediately. I got him. Because I realized that's what he was actually phoning up for. He was wanting some expert, and he picked the wrong one, asking me. I was too expert. Some expert to tell him, yes, it was okay, because he knew it was wrong. He wanted someone to convince him it was right. Otherwise, why would he ring up? If he thought it was right, he just wouldn't ring up. He wouldn't tell anybody. He'd just carry on. And maybe his wife was listening, could pick up his voice. But anyhow, you realize that the person knew it was wrong, and most people do. And again, sometimes it's just the peer pressure, or we try and justify it. But why do we think it's wrong? Why do we know it's wrong? Because it hurts another person. One of the most important things in a relationship, as you all know, is trust. You want someone you can trust. Someone who says something and you can actually believe them. And because that's so rare in our world to have trust, at least we want the person we commit to as our friend and our partner, our fellow journeyer in life. We want them. At least I can trust one person. Maybe not be able to trust anybody else, but at least you trust them. And without that trust, a relationship is so lonely. You can't share. So that's why it's a terrible, terrible thing to breach that trust. They call it cheating on your partner, by taking another partner when you've already got one, even temporarily. Because it really hurts. It goes to the very essence of a relationship and destroys it. Which is why that people react so fiercely when they find out that you've been seeing someone else. Why do they react that way? Why have you reacted that way if that's what what you have experienced? Because it is attacking something so beautiful and so spiritual and so wonderful and desecrating it. That's why. So we investigate, we look deeply into it. Why? So we don't just believe these things as rules. Because if we just believe them as rules laid down by some man 2,500 years ago, 2,600 years ago, probably didn't understand modern life, and it's well past its use by date. If we look at sort of ethics in that way, we're missing a huge amount of truth. Why does it hurt? What is it hurting when someone messes around in a marriage, in a relationship? Why? And you can see that it's that deep sense of trust between two people. That intimacy. I'm not talking just about sexual intimacy, I say intimacy between two people who get so close to each other. They open up their vulnerable part. So much can be hurt. And you're willing to take that risk with another person and be vulnerable. And opening up and being vulnerable to someone else takes a huge amount of trust. And when that vulnerability is abused, it hurts so much more. You have taken off your armor in that relationship. You've taken out away all of the things which have protected you, which means that you are so fragile, so easily hurt. When someone takes advantage of that trust and hurts you in that way, that is just, if you're going to use the word bad, that is really bad. That is unskillful. That is unwholesome. That should never be done. You only have to look at movies. You only have to read books. You only have to just know from your own life what happens. Sometimes in ethics, or some of all these rules, I don't just want to sort of believe them superficially. I want to ask why. And if it hurts, why does it hurt? Where is that pain coming from? And you feel that rule, and you feel that hurt, you feel that deep pain. And now you know why it's a rule, why it's a precept. You're just trying to protect people, that's all. Just trying to sort of stop the suffering in life and the pain in life. Have a harmonious society, families which can trust each other, examples for others to follow. So that at least two people, the one you choose to walk along with in this life, it's one person I can trust. And please, you be that person. And please, never let go of that trust. It's so valuable because once you've been hurt so many times, that just life loses its meaning, it loses its beauty. So that's why it's really, really, really important to keep your happiness and peace. If you made a mistake, admit it. But please don't do it again. It's hurt. If you have failed, you've only got 7 out of 10. Please try and make it better next time. So if you have broken any of these precepts, whether it's drinking or adultery or whatever, there's no punishment. So again, take away the punishment from these precepts. They're not rules where you get sort of whipped afterwards or you get sort of banished or executed. Just the nice thing about Buddhism, we understand, but if we make a mistake, not punishing, learning. So that's why we follow that AFL code. Acknowledge if you made a mistake. Acknowledge it, be honest. Forgive. And learn. So you don't have to do it again. And look, it's part of my job. People I've known for a long time, they do come up and they do say, my husband has broken his vows, he's slept with someone else, or my wife has done that, and I have to fix it up. You know what I do to fix it up, and it's very successful? I tell them, please forgive. One of you has made a big mistake. Do you acknowledge that? Do you really feel it? Do you really know it's a big mistake? And as long as they acknowledge it and they realize the pain which they've caused the other person, no more punishment. Forgive and learn from that. Even if you have been hurt, if you can bring yourself to forgive, you're going to make a huge, big, strong relationship. Sometimes we have to be hurt once to understand. Wise people don't need to be hurt that much. But some people, they do need to feel, the raw pain before they learn. So if that's happened to your partner, and they really want to be forgiven, they really want to sort of try again, give them a chance. Because I've seen so many relationships have actually grown from infidelity. I'm not encouraging it as a way, it's a difficult path. We've got to be careful there. But if it has happened, stupid. Okay, but if it has happened, please forgive. Once is one too many times already, but a lot of times people do learn. And they do grow. They do become better people. And I've seen many sort of relationships like that. People who have been on the edge of divorce, right? You've been infidel. You've practiced infidelity, but I'm going to forgive you. Don't do it again. And if you get a person like that who's willing to forgive you, you'd be absolutely an idiot to do it again. You've got an incredibly powerful, beautiful, wonderful, spiritually deep person. You've hurt them more than you could hurt any other person. You've hurt them so deeply, and they're willing to let it go and forgive you. And that's an incredibly powerful, beautiful, loving person. You should value that as an amazing jewel in your life. You've got a partner who's an incredible person. Never do it again. They don't deserve that. If they're willing to forgive you, they don't deserve to be hurt any more times. Get your act together. And that way you can be as beautiful, happy, peaceful people. So those are the 2 precepts. This lady sent me an email. Can you talk about these 2 precepts today? And hopefully, I was a bit reticent to talk about precept and moralizing people and looking like some sort of big priest who's telling you what to do and what not to do and sending you to hell if you don't do this. And And I don't really like that. I never liked that myself. Just giving some reasons why you can actually keep these precepts. And I putting effort into doing this simply because I've known many of you for such a long time. Those of you I don't know, I see you here every Friday evening, and I care for you. I really want you to be happy. Like, you want me to be happy, you want everyone else to be happy. That sort of wanting the very best in everybody who you see. I really developed that a lot as a monk. I really want you to live a happy, beautiful, peaceful life. And so if you can keep just those 2 precepts, they're not that hard. You live a much happier life. You'll be more aware, alert, in your life. And inhibitions, which usually take alcohol to get rid of, you don't need that. There's another way. And you can actually be safer in this life, enjoy it much more. And also just have this beautiful sense of spiritual trust between yourself and your partner, between yourself and your own body, not abusing your body, but caring for it, looking after it with mindfulness and compassion. Because all these precepts, that's all where they come from, mindfulness and compassion. You put those 2 together, and all the precepts, they just all fall into place. So that's the talk for this evening. So thank you so much for listening, and thank you for taking on board some of what I said. And so are there any questions or comments on what I've just been talking about tonight? Oh, sadhu, yeah. Okay, any comments or questions about this evening's talk? Yeah. Eating meat, no, it didn't actually mention that. It's just because they're precepts. If you're not breaking the precepts, doesn't mean you're always doing good things. For example, there's no precept against gambling, but that can be a huge sort of problem for some people. Okay, if you just gamble a little bit, maybe not much, but sometimes people, they gamble their whole life away. So there's no precept against that, but these are just the basic precepts to keep you reasonably safe. There's much more you can do, but that's just the basics. Any other question? Okay, 1 and then 2, yeah. Okay, the difference between transcendental meditation and meditation you're doing here tonight is this one is much cheaper. That's the biggest difference. This is all for free. And number 2, this is actually right down the line, core ancient Buddhist meditation teachings, and it's very, very powerful. And it actually does work. And there's more people who actually do this type of meditation than transcendental meditation. That retreat I just gave in Thailand, 200 people, more would if they could get there to come. There's a huge demand for this type of meditation because it really, really works. And it's given out freely. And sometimes if you actually charge for the meditation or charge for the teachings, there's something which is really wrong in that. Spirituality should have nothing to do with money. Because once you have religion and money gets involved with each other, there's terrible, terrible things happen. Then I give you certificates. I give you stage 1 in meditation, costs $100. Or maybe the first 3 lessons are for free. And then I start sort of increasing the price. And then I start getting scams like, there's no entrance fee to come into this hall. We have to pay to get out. So that's one of the main differences. This is open and it's free. And it's something I always liked about openness and freedom. Does that make sense? I know all the techniques, we have all those techniques as well. So what you hear here is only a fraction of all the different meditation techniques. For example, Ajahn Sujata, he did a metta retreat about a week or 2 ago. Some other monks do the mantra retreats. So these are standard teachings of meditation. They've been out there. There's no secrets to them. So the standards, they're wide. But what's really most important, the method, what you actually do is not as important as how you do it. And that's the most important part of meditation. Whether you're chanting a mantra to yourself, or you're watching the breath, or you're doing metta, it's how you're meditating. Whether you're grasping or whether you're letting go, whether you're controlling or whether you're being at peace. Okay, Eddie at the back. Okay, you said that you heard the Buddha establish the 5 precepts so the lay people could have a middle way and live a very good life. It's not just for lay people, it's for monks as well, but we have to keep those rules too. Yeah, we have 5 precepts and quite a lot more. But sort of, you do that for the sake of making people happy. And I think that is the thing which really sort of got to me. And for those of you who know Pali, Anawajja Sukha. Anawajja Sukha is called the blameless happiness, is what happens when you keep precepts. And I've known that because keeping precepts for so many years as a layperson, then as a monk, your happiness level rises. Your average level of happiness gets higher and higher and higher and higher. Yeah, you have your high days, your low days. But even your low days are much higher than the bad days, than the high days. The lows are much better than the high days you had years ago. Just average happiness goes up, 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 up. And other people actually see that. Sometimes you don't see that, but other people say, oh, you're a much more peaceful, happy person. Just even Bangkok recently, sort of one girl, she knew me for a long time, but she hardly ever came to the talks. All her family did. And she came to my retreat in Phuket and started coming to all my talks because she saw the result on her mother. Her mother sort of stopped shouting at her so much. And that much was enough. So there's something going on here. So she wanted to try out and see if she could find out why her mother was a much nicer mother after she'd been meditating for such a long time.